let's do business now. I am Beverly Broohm. Now, cost of borrowing is expected to go up after the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana increased its policy rate by 1% to 28%. The policy rate is the rate at which the central bank lends to commercial banks in the country. Now, addressing the media, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, noted that the action is needed to deal with inflationary pressures and also help resolve current challenges facing the economy. George Wiafe has the rest of the story.
The governor noted that the increase was needed to complement efforts by government to fast-track the process in stabilizing the economy.
The MPC believes that these measures will help restore fiscal and debt sustainability and bring down inflation, as well as help stabilize the currency. In the interim, the MPC sees the need to remain vigilant and moderate liquidity in the system to underpin the macroeconomic adjustments taking place to drive inflation on a downward path.
Dr. Ernest Addison also ruled out suggestions that Bank of Ghana should look at a fixed exchange rate regime because of the recent challenges with the Ghana cedi in the last quarter of 2022.
Flexible foreign exchange system has worked very well for Ghana since 1986, when we liberalized the market. Now, that framework assumes that your macroeconomic fundamentals will be strong. And there have been years that that framework has delivered exchange rate stability. Even in 2021, the cedi was stable. The year before that, 2019, 2018, we were able to keep the cedi relatively stable, maximum 5%, 6% depreciation for the whole year. So yes, if something goes wrong with the underlying economy and you see a much higher depreciation, you don't go back and say the framework is the problem. The problem is not the framework.
On support for banks that will be hit by the debt exchange program, this is what the governor had to say.
On the basis of that exercise, the bank came out with regulatory reliefs, which we thought would help them deal with the impact on liquidity and capital. We agreed to reduce the cash reserve ratio from 14% to 12% on domestic currency deposits, reduce the cash reserve ratio from 13 to 12% on foreign currency deposits. These measures gives liquidity back to the banks. It addresses the issue of the impact of liquidity. We also dealt with the issue of capital by reducing the capital conservation buffer by 3%. So the capital adequacy ratio was reduced from 13 to 10%. And even some of the technicalities surrounding the debt exchange in terms of derecognition losses and all of that, we agreed to have them restore its impact on capital over a 4-year period. So there are a lot of things that the Bank of Ghana has agreed to do to help the banks deal with the impact of the domestic debt exchange on capital and liquidity.
Dr. Addison has also been giving details on Ghana getting the IMF financial support by the end of the first quarter of this year.
Gone very far. You're aware that we've gone very far with the staff level agreement. We hopefully should be seeing the end of the domestic debt exchange. We are also making progress on the external side, on the external debt restructuring. The necessary committees have all been formed. And we are confident that by the end of the first quarter, we should be able to get a disbursement from the IMF to help augment the foreign exchange resources of the central bank. So I don't foresee a situation where, we would be in that kind of trouble.
The governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, was optimistic that the debt exchange program will rather help stabilize the economy and deal with the current pressures on the local currency.
Now, in a related development, banking consultant Nanotwe Champon has maintained that the action by the Bank of Ghana was in the right direction.
Concerns situate within the model that they are using, and that model is inflation targeting. And in simple terms, inflation targeting means that these two things should move in tandem: inflation rate and interest rate. So as inflation rate moves up, interest rate should also move up to calm down the situation and bring inflation down. Now, we've been practicing this since the 2000s, and it has helped because we have had instances where inflation has come as low as single digit, interest rate has come as low as almost single digit. And so I don't think this is the time to ditch that policy and go for an alternative policy. We've got no option but to stick to it until the end, which will be until we are able to achieve the purpose for which we opted for inflation targeting.
There was one question that I asked the governor about the local currency's performance, and he again sought to justify this whole inflation targeting framework being result-oriented. And the blips we saw in December where the currency went down, appreciated sharply or gained sharply, and then it went down. Some are saying that maybe the time has come for us to look at more of a fixed rate and defend it as well. The governor seemed not to support those who are pushing that argument. What do you make of this?
I think I'll side with him because the fixed rate went through the roof as far back as 1953 after the end of the Second World War, and then they got together in Bretton Woods and decided that, okay, you can have a rate, one of the two, either fixed or floating, or a semi type of thing. We opted for the floating, it's not fixed. So I think it's too late in the day for us now to go back and say, no, we want to go for fixed rate, because each of them has their benefits and limitations. And the way to control inflation is when you are in fixed rate, it becomes difficult to control inflation. So I think in the floating, semi-floating stage, it's good for us to continue going on. I wouldn't panic and go for the fixed rate, which you'll find in very, very limited regimes in the world.
Tightening policy rate signals a very interesting impact on the cost of credit. And for many, this is not what we should be expecting this time as well. Don't you think that maybe at worst we should have kept the rate unchanged because of the impact of a hike on the cost of credit?
No, the model works on the basis that as long as inflation is rising, interest rate has to keep rising to check inflation to come down. So they didn't have the option and saying that because cost of credit is now around 40%, we should keep it down. Rather, they moderated it because I think the expectation would have been by 2 or 3%. So the 1% is a moderately low figure, the minimum that they could go to fit into the inflation target.
Away from that, managers of some shopping centers on the Spintex Road in the Greater Accra region have been grabbed by officers of the Ghana Revenue Authority for issuing fake value-added tax VAT invoices. The shops include China Mall, Snedda Shopping Center, Palace Mall and Second Cup Coffee. The exercise was undertaken by a joint team from the GRA and the Criminal Investigations Department of the Ghana Police Service. The exercise is part of moves by the GRA to boost revenue mobilization through enforcing the tax laws. Commissioner for Domestic Revenue at the GRA, Edward Jambra, has been addressing journalists.
The China Mall, they were not issuing the VAT invoice. Then Palace Mall, they are also issuing receipts with duplicate signature of the Commissioner General. And then we have Snyder Shopping Center. They are also issuing non-EVAT invoice. And then we have Fresh First Limited, that's second cap. They are also not issuing EVAT invoice. All these places are centered at Spintex.
The operation is a continuation of the electronic VAT enrollment system, which was introduced by the authority in the last quarter of 2022. According to the Commissioner for Domestic Revenue and the Ghana Revenue Authority, Edward Jambra, some of the companies that have been engaged to begin with the process have compromised the system and acting contrary to the law.
Some of these taxpayers who have been hooked on, who are supposed to have been hooked on to the Commissioner General's invoicing system, are not fully complying with the directive. And what we saw was that some of them were issuing invoices outside the system. And as a result, these are infractions. These are, they have fractured the law.
Managers that were affected by today's exercise include China Mall, Snyder Shopping Center, Palace Mall, Second Cap Coffee, all on the Spintex Road, and ShopRite at the Junction Mall. Meanwhile, manager in charge of enforcement for Accra at the Ghana Revenue Authority, Joseph Aman, disclosed that all the managers arrested will be made to face the law court to defend themselves.
We have brought them to our customs head office. We are going to take their statement, and then the CID will continue with their investigation, and then we'll see what happens next.
So after taking their statements, like you say, the CID is going to do investigation. Whilst doing the investigation, what will be happening to them?
What will happen is that definitely they have been arrested, so somebody will have to bail them. But beyond that, we are looking forward to prosecution, because it looks like they are not taking us serious. Because we have just started a new process and already look at what is happening. Probably they want us to bar our teeth at them before they do the right thing, and that we shall surely do. We are looking forward to seeing some of them in court.
The exercise is expected to continue until all selected shops for EVAT system complied with.
And that's all for business. Please log on to myjoyonline.com/business for more. My name is Beverly Broohm. Have a good evening.